people ask about, a lot of times the racial disparity in the drug war comes up, which is horrendous. And people ask me, well, why is that? And I say there's two reasons. One is we're a racist society. I mean, let's be honest about it. We're trying to get past that, but we aren't yet. Okay.
Even the Higher Education Act, I wanted to ask you briefly to mention.
Right, about cutting out the funding for people to go to school and stuff like that. That's one of the reasons. But there's another reason, and it has to do with marketplace. Most of the city business, drug business, is done in public, street corner dealing. Most of the suburban drug dealing is done over the dining room table. Okay? The three of us are all potheads. You got a connection. So when you pick up some, you give us a call. We stop over at the house. We divvy it up. We give you the money. You make enough on it to get your drugs for free. The rest of us pay the vig, but we're safe. And we ain't looking to add anybody to the group because we're not in this to make money. We're just in it to get the drugs. And it's hard to get a narc in there. And how do you bust this thing? It's a lot easier to set up a camera on a street corner someplace and just film the transaction and then go out and get the warrants. So, and cops are like any other profession in the world. We are fundamentally lazy human beings. We do the job the easiest way it is to be done. And if you're cops out there, don't be offended by that. I did the job for 20 years. You know, I know all we do is not eat donuts and drink coffee, so don't get your, your ponytail in a twirl there. But we all know we're human beings, so we're lazy. And we do it the easiest way. And what the government wants is numbers, and that gives us numbers, Well,
I'd like to bring up some issues while we're talking about prison. I have a fine, outstanding book here called Drug War Facts, folks.
An excellent book.
Yep, and you can go right online, drugwarfacts.org, and the facts are updated all the time. But, let's talk about the drug war and the consequences on the family. In the sense that, well, geez, someone gets put in prison for a nonviolent offense,
I was down in Stamford on Monday, and I did an NAACP meeting there, and the chief of police came. And we had no controversy. We had a nice little talk afterwards. And he was talking about their efforts that they had done in the drug war. He spoke after I did my presentation. And he was talking about them kicking people out of apartment buildings who, when somebody in the family gets busted, they throw everybody out. So I told him a little story. And the story I told him was about up in Syracuse, where they, back in the early 90s, they brought the weed and seed program to Syracuse. I don't know if you know what the weed and seed.
Yeah, it's right on the street where we live.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first off, I just want to warn everybody that always be nervous about a government who calls human beings anything other than human beings. And when your government starts referring to human beings as being weeds, this isn't a good sign, okay? Because these are human beings. These aren't weeds. Well, these are human beings we're talking about. And what they did was, what the idea of the weed and seed program is, they'd come in, weed out the bad element, and then seed it with federal money to get some businesses going and stuff like that, and to make the neighborhood better. This was the idea.
Shenanigans.
So in Syracuse, when they brought that thing to us, I went to a meeting that the federal prosecutor, who was like the head guy for this thing, gave the presentation. He gets all done giving his presentation, and I stood up to ask a question. He knows me. So he kind of had some idea where the question was going to be coming from. But my question was this. I said to him, I'm not a gardener. My lovely wife is a gardener, and my wife has a compost pile where she takes the weeds and puts them. And what I asked him was, for this weed and seed program, I understood that part of the compost pile would be the prison system. But where do the other weeds go? Where's the other compost pile? Because when you take that person out of the family, the other 3 or 4 that are left behind, where do they go when you kick them out? And when I mentioned that to the chief in Stamford, he was a little, well, that is a problem.
But it's not my problem.
Well, yeah, and I understand in Stamford, the way he explained it, they were doing this pre-conviction. They were evicting people from housing, or they still are, I guess, upon arrest. Now, you're innocent in this society until you're proven guilty in a court of law, but yet they're evicting people out of their housing and threaten landlords with seizing their building if they allow drug dealing, and if they think that they know, not that they prove that they know, if they think that they know that there was drug. This is not America. This isn't the America that I thought that I was living in.
So here we have The most serious offense for 72% of women in federal prisons and 30.4% of women in state prisons is a violation of drug laws. The number of women incarcerated in prisons and jails in the United States is approximately 10 times more than the number of women incarcerated in Western Europe countries, even though Western Europe's combined female population is about the same size as the USA. And so, you know, the negative impact of the war on drugs, you know, we need to point these things out because people don't see these things. You know, maybe we could talk a little bit about the impact of economics as far as...
It's always economics.
I mean, this is where we're really going to get people's attention.
The alcohol prohibition was brought to us out of a Protestant Reformation that started in the late 1800s in this country and rolled into the early part of the 20th century. That was an anti-Catholic, anti-Jewish movement, all right? It was a Protestant Reformation. This is historical.
Sure.
There's no argument about this. My mother, who was born in 1904, I remember her telling me that there used to be ads in the Buffalo newspaper, and the ad would say, man needed to do work, and the last line would say, Catholics need not apply. Okay? Now, and if you don't think that that's true, remember the hubbub in this country when we were going to elect our first Catholic president, John F. Kennedy, how nervous people were about Catholic being president. And I'd also like to point out our only Catholic president in the history of this nation was John F. Kennedy. So we haven't put one in since then, so I'm not sure all that's gone. The people that didn't like these recent immigrants pouring in through Ellis Island, who were predominantly Italian and Irish and Jews coming out of Western Europe, they couldn't really go after them because this is America. You can't be mad at those people. So they went after drug of choice, alcohol. And part of that was pointed at those groups. So who were the dirty, no-good scum of alcohol prohibition? Italian, Irish, and Jews. Oh my. Okay? Yep. Isn't that odd? Now you have to look at those three groups of people and ask yourself, what is genetically wrong with those people that makes them criminals? Or is it something we did? And today, what do you see? Blacks, Hispanics, and Asians, oh my. Now, is it something genetically wrong with those people, or is it the same economic forces brought to bear on those groups today that were brought to bear on those groups back then? And we're dumb enough, on top of everything else, to give them this underground marketplace to wallow in. But I think the people that create it say, well, what the heck, at least they're killing each other. You know, with the shootings.
That's the solution right
well,
there.
yeah. I mean, I had a guy, I ask a question in every presentation I give, raise your hand if you believe we can make drugs go away. I mean, let's face it, this is a war on drugs. Victory is only judgeable by one thing, that you defeat the enemy. So we have to have victory in a war. All right, so if there's a war on drugs, we're going for victory. That means at some point we're going to make the drugs gone. No more heroin, no more marijuana, all gone. We won the war.
You must stop at some point and say what's not a drug, because when they're advertising this prescription drug and that prescription drug
everything
in the
else.
Room,
well, yeah,
it's like, where does that thing
I'll tell you what.
drugs
You know what?
be
You know what it is. You know what it is. It's those drugs that are only for pleasure. You know, like Viagra.
Or what was it? Someone was just saying about, one of our neighbors was just talking about all the people come in, oh, I got a back pain here, and they get their painkillers there, and then they go to the next hospital. I mean, they must enjoy them for something else besides back pain.
Well, exactly. But the point is, you can either do things directly against the people if you live in a fascist, an admittedly fascist society, or if you're living in a pro-society, you really can't do things against people. So what you have to do is find things that people do in order to go after people, and that's part of what this drug war is. But that starts drawing us into conspiracy theories, which I hate.
Right.
You know.
Well, here we have a simple fact, once again, from our drug war facts book, concerning crime, that is. And let's see, it is important to note that each of the most violent episodes in this last century coincide with the prohibition on alcohol and the escalation of the modern-day war on drugs. In 1933, the homicide rate peaked at 9.7 per 100,000 people, which was the year the alcohol prohibition was finally repealed. In 1980, the homicide rate peaked again at 10 per 100,000.
Now, interestingly enough, that homicide rate rose, if you look at the federal statistics, steadily from 1920 to 1933. It peaked in 33, and by 37, 4 years later, the homicide rate in America was back down to the level it was in 1920. when Prohibition started. And I want to point something out.
Yep.